Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Today's topic is that companies can't be both greedy and risky. Michael, what are we talking about?
Yeah, Del, so a little bit of background just to look at some figures here.
Yeah.
So if we go back to the 9th of March 2009, history shows that was the very bottom of the ASX, so the largest 200 companies in Australia, and the S&P 500, the largest 500 companies in America. That was the bottom of the global financial crisis lows. They were on that date, they were some 57% below their previous highs, which occurred in 2007. Since that period of time, the largest 500 companies in America have grown at a circa 17.5% per annum compound return from that bottom. Again, on the 23rd of March 2020, both those indices again hit their lows for 2020. They were down 37% with COVID. COVID fears, so that had forced people to panic out, and the price had dropped by 37%. Now, from that bottom, if we just look at the ASX 200 this time, with dividends reinvested, that index is up a total of 68% to the 8th of October 2021. So it was down 37%. It's up 68% from that bottom.
Yeah.
If you measure from the bottom up to where it is now.
Yeah. And
so it's always, sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting because people who aren't really numbers focused are probably glazing over a little bit, but the point that we're making here is, like, during that time, those are some huge amounts of those positive returns are astronomical. Really, when you look at it over, from March 2009, 12 plus years ago, 17.5% rate of return since then. So from the bottom, and the bit that I think is interesting is that includes that. That's not from the bottom to the peak before COVID. That's from the bottom to now, including the drop during COVID.
Yes.
So, and then even in this last sort of 18 months, the ASX 200 being up 68%. It's not quite double, but it's in the ballpark. And so those are huge returns, and those returns have been driven by the profits of those biggest and best companies.
They've been driven by the profits, and we haven't even spoke about profits yet.
No.
And what strikes me as strange, I've heard this from over the years from numerous people, and it's from the same individuals.
Yeah.
Will say, they'll lament how profitable companies are.
Yeah.
But at the same time claim that they are risky. So
Yeah.
So one individual will say,
these big
greedy companies making all this money. I just heard again that NAB's made an all-time record profit, or CBA's made an all-time record profit, or Woolworths or whatever. And then in the next breath they'll say, investing in shares is risky.
Yeah.
And I've always found that strange.
Yes.
And I've thought, if this representative is this a representative sample of how people in general feel about this?
Well, I think
it can't
be both.
It can't be both.
And this is the point that the whole point of this is that companies can't be both greedy and risky. So it's either that, and this is, I've actually had some really, really good, interesting conversations with my mother-in-law about this, because she's actually a very good debating partner, which is good, because I think me and her love to have these debates, and everyone else is having dinner and just going, I wish these two had stopped talking about this. But we've had discussions before about how, say the big banks, for example, and that was the example I was thinking of throughout this. from March 2009, the big banks were seen. You know, that was when there was a couple of banks in America that had gone bust. There was a lot of fear about banks going broke, and that was why those panic bottoms were hit. Was that, you know, the financial system is going to melt down. That was, you know, the phrase that was all the time. It was, you know, these banks are going to go to zero. They're going to be worth nothing. It's going to be it's going to be like the Great Depression when people were lining up outside your local NAB branch. So that was March 2009. That was the feeling or the sentiment. Fast forward not even 10 years, and we've had the Royal Commission into the big banks, where for you know, I can't remember, 3 to 6 months it felt like the news headlines were constantly these greedy big banks are too profitable. These banks are making too much money. Now, just to clarify here, separate to all of this, there is a company is just a collection of individuals. So yes, the individuals within that company can be too greedy, and they can do the wrong thing. And that's, it's not to say that anything that a company does should be a free for all. There are laws, there are regulations for a reason. It's to stop, you know, poor behaviour, poor corporate governance within these organisations. But I think the point that you touch on there is that within the space of 10 years, and I think what actually happens is that this happens not just within 10 years, it happens day by day. People will literally go, it really annoys me that CBA or NAB charged me $2.50 to take cash out of the machine that isn't branded the NAB or the CBA one. That's they're rip-off merchants. They're just focused on making money. They're greedy. They're this, they're that. And then in the next breath say, but I don't want to invest in CBA, or I don't want to invest in the biggest and best companies in Australia around the world. They're too risky. If all their job is, if these companies or the individuals operating these companies, if you genuinely feel that all their job is to think about how to run a profitable and enduring and sustainable and, you know, maximize their shareholder return over the long term, which is the mandate effectively, you can't simultaneously think it's horrible and inhumane that companies are focused purely on shareholder value, and then also say it's too risky. I don't want to own a share of that. Now, like I said here, this is not getting into who's right and who's wrong about what companies, how they should behave and not behave. It's just interesting that those are two conflicting thoughts. Realistically, they're two sides of a coin, and it's like thinking you're going to flip heads and tails at the same time. It's either one or the other. They're either greedy and horrible, and they just care about money, and they're just, you know, sucking profits into themselves and paying it out to shareholders and not caring about the community at large, or they're not greedy, in which case, you know, they're not going to be focused on profits, and that would be scary for the shareholders. But it can't be both at the same time.
Yeah, look, absolutely. You know, it's always struck me strange that, and I think people do make those comments without thinking about it, thinking it through, and they take a lot of. I mean, there's just been it seems like forever, and certainly before my time, there's been this misconception that shares are risky.
Yeah.
And when you say it like that, you can see how people do carry that misconception on, because they say the word shares.
Yeah.
You know, shares are risky. Well, we use the word companies.
Yeah.
So owning and holding the largest, you know, couple of hundred companies in Australia and the largest 1,500 companies in the world, the biggest and best companies, and being well and truly diversified. We would argue with anyone that it's risky. Yeah, it's volatile at times, but we drive this into the ground like a tomato stake because of the fact that it is the best way that we know for our clients to meet their goals and objectives. We just know of no other asset class than the best quality companies of Australia and the world that will be as diversified, give us and our clients a growing income stream throughout their retirement. And when you look at the way that companies operate, they say, take that bundle of the largest 500 companies in America, for example. So their profits are up roughly tenfold where they were 30 years ago. So I don't think people understand how that really works. So people, I think, assume also that'll get to a ceiling, and that profit making ability will hit a ceiling and it'll never grow any higher. So how companies make a bigger and bigger profit every year is they reinvest some of last year's profit and improve their business. And I use this example all the time because it's nice and tangible. But when Woolworths started in 1925, they had 5 supermarkets. Now they've gotten to a business now that has over 1,000 supermarkets, purely and simply by reinvesting the profits that they had from 5 supermarkets and then getting to 10 supermarkets. And then, of course, they make a bigger profit from 10 supermarkets and they reinvest some of that profit and they get to 20 and they're making a bigger profit off 20. And all the while, inflation's going up as well.
That's a really good example of one where, so as an example of a complaint that I've heard about companies where they go, this Woolworths is pushing out all the mum and dad stores. So, the people have a problem with that in some ways because they go, this poor couple that had the local grocery store, they've been pushed out by Woolworths has come in and cut their lunch and taken over all their customers, and that shouldn't be allowed. Now, and again, this is not a place here is not to say whether that should be allowed or not, but you can't simultaneously say, okay, well, Woolworths has come in and cut out all the mum and dad operators, and they're now getting all the profits. They're getting all the sales from all those customers in that local area. They're making all the profit. You can't think that that's greedy and inhumane, and then also say owning Woolworths shares is risky. It just doesn't. Those two things don't compute. You're complaining about them making too much money, and at the same time scared that they're not making enough money, or they're not going to continue to make enough money. It doesn't compute.
No, it doesn't. So essentially, companies can be more and more profitable every year because of that reinvestment philosophy. So,
I think there's another thing here that you sort of. Yes, I'm trying to think of what other, again, these are all valid concerns or thoughts or concerns that people have about big companies having too much power and too much of the power in negotiations. There's an ongoing debate that has been around since the invention of the joint stock company. Of the value that's created by this organisation, how much should go towards labour, how much should go towards capital, and how much should go towards customers. And someone else who's more of an economist will probably go, that's it, that's not it, you got it wrong. They're called different things. But basically they're saying if a company makes a lot more money, how much of it should flow through in higher wages to the employees, how much of it should go through as dividends to the shareholders, and how much should go through as reduced cost to the customers. And so I think the other thing that people think or fear, or the reason why they don't feel that that's sustainable, is because it's assumed that that's a zero-sum game as well. It's that if this company is making more profit, they have to be either driving down the wages of their staff, or they have to be ripping off their customers in order to make that to have that profit flowing through to the shareholders. And it's the Woolworths thing is a great example again there, where if you've got 5 supermarkets, you've got a few staff, you've got not many shareholders, and you've got some customers who are probably paying a relatively high price for their goods because you don't have the buying power. Now, if you've got 3,000 supermarkets, you have to have the staff to not just to run that, but to manage that and to do it. So we won't get into the whole thing of whether that's creating jobs or not, but you have to have a heap more staff. You have to be providing a progression and a pathway for them to become higher earning over time. Otherwise, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. So you have to some degree, you have to be doing at least the bare minimum to keep your labour on side. And you have to be keeping the price down for your customers. Otherwise, someone else is going to come in and cut their lunch. So Woolworths becoming more profitable over time, it's not as though they've maintained the same 5 supermarkets and they've just squeezed the life out of their 30 employees, and it's not as though they've just drained that local community where they by driving up the price of their groceries. and then float all these huge amounts of profits through to the shareholders. It doesn't work like that. It can't work like that. It has to be over the long term. The only way this continues to work, or the only way that this would work, is to be a sustainable thing where the employees are receiving higher wages over time to allow for at least inflation and some potential wage growth. The customers have to be getting a better deal, otherwise they're going to go down the street to someone else who can do a better job for cheaper. And your shareholders, as a byproduct of serving those groups, or of those two groups being happy, contributing members of the organisation by contributing their labour and their money as customers, that's where the profit comes from. So I think there's also a component of, we won't even get into this, of the whole thing of a lot of companies that are seen as risky, is that it would be risky for a company to just turn around and go, we're going to double our prices tomorrow and we're going to halve our wages tomorrow. Because you'd go, well, you're going to lose all your staff and you're going to lose all your customers. And yes, you're going to, by being purely greedy in the short term, you are going to blow your whole company up. That's not how companies operate. They're not doing it to be good corporate citizens as much as they'll advertise that. But the reason why they pay rising wages over time, the reason why they bring pricing down over time, is because they want to keep all those customers and keep all those employees and make long-term growing profits over time. So I don't know whether that helps at all.
Yeah, look, it does, and it really just highlights there that you can diversify away from any of these risks as well.
Yep.
Because we're talking about the concept of profitability and then riskiness.
Yes.
Okay, so if I own a broad range of the best quality companies in Australia and around the world, I diversify away from those risks. Yeah, I have. Over time, there's companies that will go to zero, that will go broke in that bundle, because they just haven't moved with the times.
Yeah,
if we're looking at a micro industry like the supermarket industry, you would have some that just can't compete for whatever reason. They've unscrupulously doubled their prices and halved their wages.
Yeah.
They can only do that for a certain amount of time before a competitor comes in and takes them out.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of it.
Yeah.
And look, it's just so easy and so cheap to be able to, done correctly.
Yes.
To be able to diversify away from that risk.
So it's probably, we've talked for 10 minutes and we've probably just actually canned our own title, which is that companies can be greedy and risky, because if they do become overly greedy, then they run a risk. But what we would consider risk in the investment strategies that we would normally recommend, is that's why you're diversified, is because we don't know. And again, using that example of the Coles versus Woolworths battle that's been going on for decades now in Australia, you don't know who's going to win that. And maybe there will be a winner, maybe there won't. Maybe there'll be some third entrant that comes in and wipes them both out. But if you were hoping that you were going to pick the right one and go, I'm only going to invest in Coles, and Woolworths comes in and takes all your customers out, then yes, that is risky. Or if you think that the big banks are the example that I talk about there, where there are profits being made by all these banks. In 10 years' time, we don't know which banks will be making what profits from which customers. There's always new entrants into that space. There's people gaining and losing market share all the time. If you think that an individual company is risky, you are correct. There is no doubt that any individual company is risky, because they either can go backwards or they can go bankrupt. But if you go, those services or those goods are going to need to be provided to people over time. People need banking. People need food. So I know that some company is going to provide that to people. Now, whether you and I know that companies out there are new entrants and the existing players. All they're thinking about is how to capture as much market share and make as much profit as possible. So I guess they are greedy in that way, but simultaneously, by doing that, they are providing these goods and services, and they're battling within themselves to provide the best goods and services possible, and to pass those profits on. So it can't be both greedy and risky.
Yeah, like they greedy is a funny word, isn't it? Because capitalism is very much like democracy. It's the worst form of structure ever known, excepting for all others. And you only have to look at communist countries and look at the standard of life that the citizens of communist countries have, where the cost of state-run companies to produce a widget is
huge.
10 times what it costs a private enterprise to produce in Australia or America or somewhere like that. So that competition and that innovation and that greed. If you say greed, if you think of it as a not a dirty word in this case, a good word, the greed to get to be better than one's competitor, to be cheaper, to be more profitable, to be to serve the customer better. That flows through. That flows through, and you just all you have to do is look at communist countries and companies, state run, versus private enterprises in democratic and democratic countries. To look at the standard of life for and the buying power that those consumers have. So I'm really opening up another can of words here by saying that.
I thought you were just about to
we're just about to wrap up.
I thought you were about to say greed is good, like old mate out of that. Wall
Street. Gordon Gekko from Wall Street.
No, but I think you're dead right where it's like that, the word greed, and I'm also reminded of this thing where people think of companies as a thing or it's just a collection of individuals. So what's the I won't go into it, but there's a great movie where old mate smashes the phone, and in Bruges I think it is. This guy's talking on the phone, he gets really upset and he smashes the phone, and his wife comes in and goes, "Harry, it's an inanimate object." And the point is, someone getting angry at the phone, it's the person on the other end of that is the issue. So if you're upset at when people say these greedy companies or these greedy banks or these greedy whatever, you may have a very valid concern there, which might be that the people in charge of that organisation are doing the wrong thing by their customers or by their employees. Like we're not here saying that people don't do the wrong thing. It's not that at all. We're just saying that drive for profit and for market share is actually fundamentally that's what takes away the risk. We can rely on what companies as a whole organisation, we know what a company is going to try and do, and so because of that, we can safely be invested in them, and we can be diversified across many of them, and know that they are going to try and make as much profit as possible and flow that through to shareholders. We can rely on that. Now, if you wanted me to invest in a company and the company said, we may or may not be a not-for-profit, I'd be very scared because I'd be going, I got no idea what these guys are focused on. I don't know what they're trying to achieve. I don't know whether they're going to, really be focused on trying to flow profits through to shareholders or not. So it's a separate issue to go, people might, corporate governance could be loosened or tightened, or, there's all sorts of issues of people doing the wrong thing in these positions of power. But across the board, your companies cannot be greedy in that way. They can't be focused on profits and on trying to, make long-term profits from their customers and keep their employees long-term in order to make those long-term profits. They can't be both focused on that and also and more and risky and risk and you can't be worried about them making too much profit over time and of share prices going to zero. It just doesn't correlate in that way.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.